part 2 of my 2024 reading wrap-up. So now we're going to get into most of the books that I read during like the second half of the year. I think I covered most of the first half of the year in the first half of the video. I actually think I got into all the way up to like August. So now we're just going to do August, September, October, November, December. That's only 5 months, but still I read like a lot in the second half of the year as well. So yeah, let's get into it. And hope you guys enjoyed my entire 2024 reading wrap up. I knew that this was going to be a long video, so I'm like, I don't think I can upload a 2-hour video to YouTube. It's just going to be way too long. So I hope you guys enjoy. Let's get into it. Then I finished Redeeming 6, of course, throughout that month. And then the next book that I read, which I just regret reading this. I wouldn't say burn, because I didn't hate it, but also, like, again, I think I might have aged out of this series. And that is The Grandest Game by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. And this is the first book in the Grandest Game duology. The second book comes out in July. Just leave it in the past, I would say. Like, it just wasn't really that good at all. But I didn't hate it, but also it just wasn't good. So then next up, I read The Wishing Game by Meg Schaffer. Sorry, my dad is just taking my garbage. This book, I just would leave it in the past because, like, again, with Meg Schaffer, I did enjoy this book more so than The Lost Story. But, like, again, with her writing, there's some, like, awkward moments in her books where, like, some of the jokes are very adult, but you're trying to make it, like, a kid's or, like, fairy tale kind of read. Then I'm like, why are these jokes in here? Like, that's what, I don't understand why people don't point this out, like, especially some of the booktubers that I read, because I'm like, is this a book you really could read to your kids? Probably not, because again, they're like, she says pornographic in this book, and I'm just like, so just leave it in the past. I just don't really understand it. Okay, next up is Primetime Romance by Kate Robb, and this was my second book that I read from Kate Robb because I was really, really excited for this book, and like I said, the first book that I read from her was This Spells Love, and I absolutely adored that book, so I was really excited for this. But I would definitely say, probably for the next couple of books, I would say rewrite. I would definitely rewrite this one, because again, I kind of felt the same about this one as I did about Bride, but I did enjoy this book a little bit more. But this book took a very, like, sinister turn for some reason. So I would definitely say rewrite because, again, I was really loving the first 100 pages. And then after that, it kind of went downhill. But it was still interesting. But, yeah, I would definitely say rewrite. Then, next up, I finally read my first Matt Haig book in 2024. Because you guys know he's one of my favorite authors. I had read 3 of his books in 2023. For some reason, I only got to 1 of his books in 2024. But this was his new release for last year, and that is The Life Impossible. I really liked this, but even though the chapters were super short, and honestly with Matt Haig, his writing is just very wordy. Like, but I also feel like his words are not wasted at all. But I kind of feel like with this, it could have been edited down a little bit. So I would say, again, rewrite certain parts. But besides that, I really did enjoy this book. I still think it was a magical experience, just like most of his books are. So yeah, then next up, I read Just Last Night by Mahari McFarlane. I would definitely say, again, rewrite certain parts of this book. I don't regret reading it at all. It was such a fantastically written book. Because, like, the quotes that she writes, some of it is amazing. But, yeah, just the romance didn't really hit as much as readers were expecting. And that's, like, kind of a lot of people's complaints with this book. Is that, like, all the other elements in this book are, like, so beautifully written. But almost those kind of elements overshadows what the actual romance was in this book. because it's in the romance section in Barnes and Noble. So again, like sometimes some romance books kind of lose their way, but you know, I still don't regret reading it. I was still emotionally impacted by it, but I wouldn't really classify it as just a romance. Okay, next up, I read one of my favorite books that I read last year, and that is Lovely War by Julie Berry. 5 stars, 100% would reread this. I love this book so much. It's one of the most unique concepts that I've read. It was just fantastic, and nobody talks about the audiobook. I swear to God, if I do end up rereading this, I am just going to re-listen to it because the audiobook is fantastic. There's a different voice for every character. And every time there's like music that plays in, because this book is divided in like Act 1, Act 2, and Tracte, whatever the hell you call it, conclusion, like stuff like that. And every time that you see that in the book of like the different parts that you're reading, music plays. And then when all of the characters actually in these books, or in this book, I mean, all play a musical instrument, and every time they play a musical instrument in the book, it plays in the audiobook. Like they're playing the piano or they're playing the, like when they're rehearsing. It was just a fantastic audiobook. But it's such an underrated audiobook. I'm like, why the hell did this not get nominated for best audiobook like when it came out? Okay, next up, I read The Wedding People by Alison Esbach. Again, I have 3 5-star reads, including Lovely War. Absolutely loved this book, would 100% reread it. If I could, I would. And then I had finished Taming 7, which was the last book in the Boys of Tommen series. Again, absolutely love it. Then next up, I did decide to read a new release, and I wasn't sure if I was going to read this book, to be honest, but then it ended up hooking me. And I honestly think I would say I would reread this, and that is The Games Gods Play by Abigail Owen, which is the first book in the Crucible series. I'm so excited for the second one. I think it comes out in, I want to say August or September. I think it's September because the first book came out in September. So really, really loved that one. I might have to stop talking for a little while because, like, I didn't think how long this was going to take me, but I only have 3 more months after this. So then next up, I read My Vampire Plus One, which was another new release that came out in September. And this is the second book in the My Vampire series by Jenna Levine. And I did not like this book as much as the first one, but I still had a fun time. But honestly, I would just leave it in the past. Because I would not feel the need to reread it. Okay. Then next up, I read the Caraval trilogy by Stephanie Garber. And so that means I read Caraval, Legendary, and Finale. I think I actually ended up finishing most of Finale in the audiobook form because I think I found most of these on YouTube for free. Would 100% reread them. I love those books. And then I read the Pumpkin Spice Cafe on my Kindle in between. And honestly, this is actually my favorite one out of the 3. I forget who. Actually, Destiny Sidwell said that this was her favorite book out of the 3 as well. And I do agree with her, even though most people say they like the second book more so than the first one. But I thought the second book was boring. The first book was fun, but I would still say probably for all of these books would be rewrites. So you'll see how I feel later. Okay. Next up is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. And this was honestly, because like I said, I still wanted to give Ali Hazelwood a chance. And I actually really, really enjoyed this book. Like I said, this was my favorite Ali Hazelwood book that I read so far. And I was like, I kind of understand the hype about this one. It is a really cheesy romance, but I really liked it. So, but I wouldn't feel the need to reread it, so just leave it in the past. And then next up was one of my most disappointing reads, if not my second most disappointing read of 2024, and that is Nothing Like the Movies by Lynn Painter. Now, this is the second book in the Better Than the Movies duology. I think it's only going to be 2 books, and I just hated this book. Again, what's so crazy, and I was also thinking about this too, was that my two least favorite books last year were Middle of the Night and Nothing Like the Movies. And both books that I had read previously from both of these authors were my favorite books I read from both of them. So it's like you think you could rely on these authors because they've read some of your favorite books that you've ever read. Because the only one left, y'all know how much I love that book. But the fact that I had just read previously from both authors my favorite book from them, because I read Betting on You before this by Lynn Painter, and then I also read The Only One Left before Middle of the Night, and those are 5-star reads for me. So this book, honestly, I would just say burn. Like, I do understand why it was made. What else? What other book did I say that just shouldn't have been written? Oh, The Grandest Game. Like, I feel like it's just so unnecessary, but also I liked The Grandest Game more so than this. Because at least The Grandest Game made me laugh a little bit. I just didn't care about the characters. But it was still, like, somewhat entertaining. Like, there was still a sense of intrigue to it that I wanted to find out what happened. With this, just hated my whole reading experience reading this. And I'm probably going to rant about it in my most disappointing reads of 2024. We're just going to leave it at that. Then next up, I finally picked up this book. And this book was on my TBR for, like, the entire year. So I'm like, I need to read this book this month. So I finally read Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayher. I would definitely reread this because I might end up rereading both of them before, like, just re-listening to them. Because I think I might get the audiobooks of both. Because the third book comes out in August and I might just re-listen to them. But they were just such a fun time. That was such a fun read. Then the last book that I read in September, like I said, was the second book in the Dream Harbor series by Laurie Gilmore. I don't think I even said Laurie Gilmore for the Pumpkin Spice Cafe. Sorry about that. And that was the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore. Honestly, I would just leave this in the past. I just, neither here nor there. But I also would say this could do with a rewrite as well. I just didn't think it was as good as the first one. I just found myself pretty bored with it. And the mystery plot was kind of dumb as opposed to the first book. Okay. Why did I put just read a fried book? I meant to say Frida. I'm going to have to correct that when I come back. Okay. Then the next book that I read was the first book I read in October. And I just really wanted to start off the month with, like, a thriller because honestly, the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, I binged it the last day of September, and honestly, I almost felt like I was going to put myself in a reading slump for a little bit because that book gave me serious burnout after I binged it. I was like, this book was, like, kind of boring. So next up, I read The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden, and that was the next Frida McFadden book I picked up. I think it was the first Frida McFadden book I picked up since Never Lie. So it was, like, quite a while that I hadn't read her books. But, like, again, I was kind of in a thriller rut. And I didn't really want to read any more thriller books for a while. So I finally picked up this book. And I actually really enjoyed it. But, again, with thriller books, not a rewrite or reread or anything. Just would leave it in the past. But it was still a fun time. And I liked this book more so than the other Frida McFadden books that I read later in the year, which we will get to. And then after that, I had to pick up the next book in the Assistant to the Villain series because I really wanted to read it and see what else happened. So I picked up Apprentice to the Villain, and that had come out, I think, like a couple of weeks before that. Or it might have came out in, like, late August. So, like, I only ended up reading it, like, a month later. I need to sit up because we're almost done with reading all of these, with talking about all of these. We're almost done. We're in October. And I really loved it. Would definitely reread it if I could. Then next up, oh my God, I loved this book. I probably would definitely say I would reread this. And that is Out on a Limb by Hannah Boehm Young. This was, like, my favorite romance that I had read since I don't even know how long, because honestly, I was kind of going through a romance rut at this point where I hadn't found a 5-star romance. I mean, yes, Taming 7 is a romance series, but it's much deeper than a romance series. So, like, I would say it was a long time that I had found, like, a 5-star, like, contemporary romance or, like, just regular kind of romance in general that you would think about that was, like, a typical romance. Absolutely adored this book. Would 100% reread it. And I do want to read more of her books this year. I just haven't had a chance to, but I want to read more of her books. And I literally can't wait. I'm so excited for Out of the Woods, which comes out at the end of January. I'm definitely reading that, so that'll be my second book from her. Okay, next up was my favorite book that I read in October, which is Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. I think this book is 100% worth the hype. I gave it a 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I would definitely reread this, and I'm so excited for Encontra to come out in April. I literally cannot wait. It's one of my most anticipated reads of the year. I love how I wore the same sweatshirt in this than I wore in my 2025 releases video, like the second half. But I've been wearing this sweatshirt like every day. It's just so comfy and so warm. Okay, next up is The X-Files by Jessica Joyce. I'm actually going to pick up You with a View later today. I actually didn't realize I wasn't going to end up going anywhere today, but I did finish a book earlier today, and then I just kind of took a break. But I'm going to read some probably after dinner and just start it. And I would reread this. I thought it was just such a good time. And honestly, it's like one of the only like books that I rated not even 5 stars. I rated like a 4.65 because it wasn't quite 5 stars for me. But I actually would be intrigued to reread this someday, you know? And I'm like saying this because I don't think I'm going to reread any books until I get through my entire physical TBR that I want to read. So, okay, next up, then I read A Song to Drown Rivers by Anne Liang, and oh my god, what a disappointing read. But there were some beautiful elements to this book, but I would definitely say a rewrite. Because I feel like this book is very mismarketed for it to claim that it's an epic fantasy. It definitely is not. If you're expecting like high stakes epic fantasy in this book, you are going to be sorely disappointed. That's why I gave it a 3 stars, because again, there were certain elements of it I really did enjoy, but it's like reading Song of Silver Flame Like Night. Like, Asian fantasy can be very sad, but those books were so high stakes and so entertaining and so magical and so epic that I would just say read those over this book. And this book is getting a lot of hype, and I'm like, Song of Silver Flame Like Night is so much better. So, but yeah, I would just say a rewrite, because I still enjoyed her writing. I think her writing is beautiful, but definitely did not meet my expectations at all. Okay, next up was actually one of my favorite Freedom McFadden reads that I read in 2024. And after I had read A Song to Drown Rivers, I was so sad because the ending of the book is extremely sad. So I was like, I need something that is fast-paced, something that's really funny. So this was sitting on my Kindle for like 2 weeks, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to read this novella. So I read The Widow's Husband's Secret Lie by Freedom McFadden, and this is just like, it was like 120 pages, so it still counts as like a full book. And I thought that this was hysterical. I had such a fun time reading this. I honestly would say I'll probably just leave it in the past. But it was just like the perfect book for that time. I was like, it was just such a fun, fast-paced, good time. Okay, next up is Immortal Dark by Tigist Girma. I would honestly say just leave this in the past, but I am intrigued to read the second book. Did I not mention that in my... Oh my god, I didn't mention this as the second book coming out in... I didn't mention this in my 2025 releases. I knew I was going to miss at least one book. I'm so stupid. There was just way too many books, y'all. Way too many books coming out in 2025, and I don't know. I did not even write this down. Well, I'm going to tell you guys now. It's coming out October 5th of 2025. Oh my god, so stupid. I would definitely say rewrite for this book. There were certain elements that I really did enjoy and certain parts that I was very intrigued by, but there was also certain parts where I was extremely confused as to who was who in this book. But it intrigued me and entertained me enough with the main character's story that I do want to continue the series. But yeah, I would definitely say rewrite. Okay, next up is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. Now, this book was so extremely overhyped last year. But I think that the book is very well written. But damn, this book is long. So I would say probably not even rewrite. Maybe I would just say re-edit. I feel like I would just cut out certain things in this book, even though a lot of it did add to the plot. Sometimes after every chapter, I would have to like refresh my memory when I went back to another, because it would constantly switch characters' perspective every single chapter. Like it would go from the mother to the child, back to the mother, to like a random friend of the mother, like, you know, stuff like that. But it wasn't hard to keep track of who was who in this compared to like Immortal Dark and Five Broken Blades. But with this one, I felt like I had to refresh my memory at the end of each chapter, because I'm like, oh yeah, we left off on a cliffhanger in the last chapter, but then you're reading about another character in the next chapter, and then you're like, oh yeah, what happened to that person? I forgot that we left off on a cliffhanger. But it was still a very enjoyable read, and I actually really liked it. But I feel like this could have been edited down, like probably 100 pages at least. I think it's way too long for what it is. And I wouldn't say it's a thriller. I would definitely say it's more of like mystery, family drama. So, okay, next up, I read Cackle, which was one of my like very Halloween reads for the month. I mean, I had read Phantasma, I read The Boyfriend, I read God of the Woods, Immortal Dark, and those were all Halloween books that I had on my TBR. But I wanted to read really fast books this weekend because I knew I had Comic-Con that weekend. So I knew I wasn't going to have that much reading time that weekend. So I'm like, okay, I need to pick a Kindle read for the train there and for the train back. So I picked Cackle by Rachel Harrison. This was just such a fun time. I wouldn't say reread, rewrite, anything. I would just leave it in the past, but it was just the perfect read for that time. It was just fun. There was definitely some suspense moments in it though, so I'd almost call it like a, I guess, parody kind of thriller almost, because some of it's like a little bit too absurd, but it was just fun. Okay, next up was The Teacher by Freida McFadden, and I think that this is Freida McFadden's like most controversial thriller, but I was still like in a thriller mood, so I wanted to read it. And I ended up reading 3 Freida McFadden books in October because I'm like, well, she's a reliable author. I do enjoy her books. And I wanted to read more thrillers in October for Halloween. And this was definitely very controversial. But again, I would just leave it in the past. I wouldn't really care to reread it. Next up is a serious rewrite. And that is Murder in the Family by Kara Hunter. I really wanted to read this because of like the mixed media kind of format to this book, because basically the whole book is told in like interview format and like TV shootings of like documentary crime documentary episodes. But honestly, I found myself not really caring about it because like the plot was kind of lackluster, so I would just say leave it in the past. But I like really I was intrigued to read it because I'm like, this book is, you know, a very fast-paced thriller, but, like, no one talks about it. And I was like, okay, now I kind of understand why people don't talk about it, because it's not very good. Okay, next up is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. I would definitely say for this one, I would reread it. And I'm very excited for the second book to be coming out later this year. I'm definitely reading that. This book is by Sangu Mandana, and I loved this book. Just such a cozy, beautiful book. I just really loved it. Then next up, I probably could never reread this again, but I absolutely loved this book, and it's my one and only Kristen Hanna book that I've read so far, but I listened to the audiobook. And that is Night Road. I could not reread this, but absolutely fantastic. I gave it a 5 stars, but devastating. But such a beautiful book, and I really am dying to get 2 more of her books. Okay, next up is the unfortunate side effects of heartbreak and magic. This book has such a low rating on Goodreads, but I actually did really enjoy this book. But I wouldn't reread it. Maybe some re-editing, but honestly, I thought it was good. I liked it, but would leave it in the past. Neither here nor there. Then next up was Go Hex Yourself by Jessica Clare. I enjoyed this book literally so much. It was such a fun time. Again, neither here nor there. Could leave it in the past, but it was so much fun. I cannot wait to get into the second book, but I'm probably not going to read that until Halloween because those are like strictly Halloween books for me. Okay, next up was Do Not Disturb by Frida McFadden. Would leave it in the past. I really, really enjoyed the first half of it, but the second half was kind of a letdown. But the first half actually creeped me out a little bit. And then the second half was just like so disappointing. So it's kind of like how it is with Frida McFadden. Okay, next up was the first book in the X-Hex series, which is called The X-Hex by Erin Sterling. This was such a fun time, but just leave it in the past. It did its job for the moment, but wouldn't feel the need to reread it or rewrite it. And then the last book that I read in October was like just a fast, short Halloween read, and that is Pumpkin Spice and Poltergeist by Allie K. Mulford. This was one of my favorite books that I read in October. This book was so freaking good. And I think oh my god, did I forget to mention? I actually don't even think there's a second book announced in this. But she does have a second book coming out. Like, her new book, it's called Prickle Island Zoo. This is her other series called Crocodile Tears. That comes out January 21st, 2025. So that wasn't really on my radar because I'm into this Maple Hollow series, and that's the only book that I've read from this author. It was actually a collab between 2 different authors. It was Allie K. Mulford and K.L. Morrison, but again, I would just leave it in the past. It was just the perfect Halloween read. I loved it. Okay, next up was the second book in the Prince of Sin series by Carrie Maniscalco, and that is Throne of Secrets. Now, this one, I would say serious rewrite because it was one of my most anticipated reads of 2024 because, like I said, I loved Throne of the Fallen so much that I was so excited for this, but I would definitely say rewrite. It was just so disappointing. And it was significantly shorter than the first book, and a lot of people say, like, same thing with, like, Powerless and Reckless. Reckless was way shorter than the first book. And a lot of people say if, like, the second book is shorter, that honestly means that it might be not as good. And I felt that way with both of them. So take that for what you will. Okay, next up, I read The Magic of Lemon Drop Pie by Rachel Linden. I loved this book. What a cozy read. So good. It does deal with some grief in this book, but the way that Rachel Linden writes is just so magical. She kind of reminds me as like a similar writing style to like Ashley Poston with like that magical realism and like that magical kind of beautiful writing. So I would definitely say reread this. I loved it. Then next up is What You Wish For by Catherine Center, and I finally picked up my 3rd Catherine Center book because I hadn't picked up a Catherine Center book since August, and this was now the first week of November. So I was like, I need to pick up another one of her books, and I wanted to pick just like a super short physical book because I was going upstate that weekend with my friends. So again, I knew I wasn't going to have that much reading time when I was there. So I was like, let me just pick this book because this book was only like 305 pages and I finished it in like a day and a half. But it was just okay. I would definitely say rewrite for this because there were some parts that the main male character was so mean. And it's definitely my least favorite Catherine Center book. And everybody says that for a reason. But I wanted to read it because it was kind of like an interconnected book to Happiness for Beginners because it it's the brother's story, but the brother becomes so mean in this book. Like, kind of almost character assassinating him from the first one because he was, like, so cute in the first book. So, just neither here nor there. I would rewrite it, though. Okay, next up is Six Scorched Roses, which is the novella in between Serpents in the Wings of Night and Ashes in the Star-Cursed King. I know I'm not really giving you my ratings now, but I just, you guys can just look me up on Goodreads, honestly. I don't know why I stopped saying the ratings. And this one I only, What You Wish For, I gave a 3 stars. Magic Lemon Drop Pie, I gave 4 stars. Throne of Secrets, I gave a 3.75. Like, most of these books are, oh, okay. Unfortunate Side Effects, I gave a 3.75. Go Hex Yourself, I gave a 4. Do Not Disturb, I gave a 3. Or maybe like a 3.25 or something. The X Hex, I gave 4 stars. Pumpkin Spice and Poltergeist, I gave a 4.5. Throne of Secrets, I gave... Okay, I already said that. So Six Scorched Roses, I only gave it a 3.5. I think I would need to reread this. Not just because I would want to, but because I don't know if I got the full experience reading this, because I read this mostly when me and my best friend were going upstate, like driving up there. So I don't know if I like paid attention to everything, but I do know mostly what was going on. And I switched off between this book because obviously this was a Kindle read and a physical book. I picked like a super short physical book to bring with me. So, because again, I didn't want to bring any books that were like too long or anything like that because I wanted to spend time with my friends. But I would say reread just so I could refresh my memory. So I'll probably just get the audiobook of it too and just re-listen to all 3 of them before the 4th book comes out, which I'm so excited, which comes out later this year. Then next up, I read The Storied Life of A.J. Fickery by Gabrielle Zevin. Honestly, I feel so indifferent towards this book. I gave it a 3.75. It was very good, very well written, but I need to read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And I don't know why I keep on putting off that book. I keep on putting off books that are so well loved, like The Nightingale, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and I really need to read them. So just leave it in the past. Then next up was the first book in the Thursday Murder Club series from Richard Osman, which is the Thursday Murder Club. I absolutely adored this, and I might say reread because I would want to refresh my memory on what happened, but also the second book in the series is on my TBR for this month. I really want to get into the second book at some point this month because I really want to continue the series, but like basically that and Go Hex Yourself or like and Love Light Farms are like the 3 series that I'm in the middle of. But those are all books, like, you know, again, cozy mystery thriller books. I don't need to binge them. I'll just pick them up when I'm in the mood to read them. Okay, next up is, so I said reread because I feel like I was kind of falling asleep at some parts, but also like it was just so much fun. I just was really sleepy at the time. And honestly, I almost felt like I was getting a little reading slumpy because I hadn't found a good book really in the first month or 2 of November. Because like I was constantly reading books that like didn't really hit, except for The Magic of Lemon Drop Pie. And then Thursday Murder Club I loved. So then I read Sky Shade, which is Light Lark number 3 by Alex Astor. Loved this. Would definitely reread it because I want to reread all 3 of them, like re-listen to all of them before the 4th and the 5th books come out because they're both coming out this year. So absolutely love that series. So finally another book hit. And my boyfriend actually told me I should read this because he was like, you deserve to read a new release. Because I was like, I haven't been reading that great books. He's like, read the new release. You know, you'll love that. So I was like, you know what? You're right. Then next up, I did read pretty much one of my favorite books of the month. One of the other books I'm going to talk about was my favorite book of the month, but this book is 6 stars for me. The other book is 5, but which makes no sense. Like you would think that this one was my favorite book of the month, but they're pretty much tied. And that is Under Whispering Door. Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune would 100% reread this. I absolutely adore his writing. I want to read more of his books so bad. I have House of the Cerulean Sea, and I really want to read that at some point this year. But I had finally gotten to at least one of his books. And oh my god, this book is one of the most magical, emotionally impacting books I've ever read. It was just beautiful. Next up, I started my romantasy journey besides Throne of Secrets and Six Scorched Roses, because I was doing that whole romantasy vlog in November, and I knew I had quite a few romantasy releases that were coming out in November, so I wanted to read them all in the same month, obviously. But there were also 2 other books that I really wanted to get to that everyone was talking about. So the next one I read was Metal Slinger, which is the first book in the Fire and Metal series by Rachel Schneider. And honestly, I would say rewrite. Even though there were certain elements that I really enjoyed in this book, there was just something about this book that I just didn't love. And I know a lot of people love it. I rounded it up to a 4 stars. I still really enjoyed it, but just leave it in the past. I really wouldn't care to reread this or not. But everybody's anxiously awaiting when the second book is going to be announced, because I think it's definitely going to be getting a sequel. But this is her one and only book, so. But I'm definitely going to continue the series because I'm intrigued to see what happens next. And then next up, these are all like first or second books in series that I'm going to continue the series, obviously. So then the next book was the third book in the Crown of Nexia series, which is The Songbird in the Heart of Stone by Carissa Broadbent, and that came out literally that day. And I read it in a day. I absolutely adored this book, would 100% re-listen to it. So I'm going to re-listen to it probably before, what is the second book called? Before The Fallen, what is it called? The Fallen and The Kiss of Dusk comes out in August as well, and I'm so excited because that's my birthday month, and that's literally one of my most anticipated reads as well. I loved this book. I gave it a 5 stars, so I would definitely reread it again. Same thing with Quicksilver by Callie Hart, Fae and Alchemy. Would 100% reread this. Absolutely my favorite book that I read in November, so that was the one that kind of trumped Under the Whispering Door, but I still adored Under the Whispering Door. Quicksilver deserves all the hype that it gets, and I understand why this book is so hyped. It's absolutely fantastic. I love it so much. And then next up is The Dagger and the Flame by this, and this is the City of Phantom series by Catherine Doyle. I would reread this because this was just so enjoyable and so much fun, and I'm so beyond excited to see where this series goes. I cannot wait for book 2. I don't know when it's coming out because, again, it's not even announced, but sure as hell going to be picking up. All right, definitely. Yeah, there's definitely no announcement of when it comes out, but I would 100% reread it. Okay, next up is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. And honestly, I really loved the writing in this book, but I feel like there's certain parts that are a bit of a letdown in this book. But I'm so excited to see the movie. So excited to see the movie. And I feel like it would translate to be an incredible movie, and I understand why this is so popular, but I kind of just wanted a little bit of a palate cleanser in between all of the romantasy I was reading. So I kind of wanted to read a thriller, and I also wanted to read something in like a day because the next day my sister was coming home for Thanksgiving. So again, I knew I wasn't going to have that much reading time. So I read The Silent Patient, and I would say probably just leave it in the past. Like I said, like with thrillers, they don't really hit the same if you know what happens. But so excited to see the movie. Then I just ended the month with this book because I read this book before I read this one. Hold on. I don't know why it does that sometimes out of order, but then I read my very first library book. I actually took this book out of the library, and I knew I wanted to read this during Thanksgiving, and it's called Recipe for a Charmed Life by Rachel Linden. So this was my second book by the author, and I absolutely adore her writing. Just adore her writing. It's just so magical, so beautiful, and I just loved it. And it was actually the second book that I had read from Rachel Linden in the month, because I read The Magic of Lemon Drop Pie, and I was like, do I really want to read a book from the same author in the month? But it's like, I adore her writing, so I knew I was gonna love it, and it was just so perfect for Thanksgiving. Did I say I would reread this? Because it's all food themes. Like, she does a lot of books with food theming, and y'all know I'm here for that. So, and then the last book that I read in, well, I also had started this book, which was Bloodguard by Cece Robeson, but and I finished that book as well. Hold on. I finished this book before the last book that I read in November, and that is Bloodguard. I really enjoyed this book. I think I would reread this book. I think this book is so mixed, but at the same time, I had such a great time reading it. Like I said in my review, there were some 5-star moments in this book for me, because I just feel like this book is a little messy. So I'd probably say, actually more so maybe some elements of rewriting of this. But I also feel like I would reread it. And I don't really know if I feel that way about any other books on this list. But this one would be a rewrite and a reread. So that's interesting. Okay, and then the last book that I read in November was a super short story, because it was like 9 o'clock on like the 30th. And I was like, I'm obviously not going to be able to have time to read like a full-length book. I just wanted to read something like super short, and I knew that this had come out like previously in the month. So I just finished off the month with The Housemaid's Wedding by Frida McFadden. Would just leave it in the past. It wasn't that great, but it was a super short read, but obviously don't feel anything towards it. Okay, and then December was my most read reading month. And I think my best reading month of the whole year, besides like January and February, obviously when I read Throne of Glass. Well, actually the first half of the year, I read some incredible series then. But I think December was my best reading month of the whole year. So then the first book that I read was Is She Really Going Out With Him by Sophie Cousins. I would definitely reread this. I loved this book. And like I said, I loved this book way more than The Good Part, and I would reread it. I gave it a 5 stars, and I just wanted to start the month with like an easy romance, because I also wanted to start the month with a new release, and I think this was the only new release I ended up reading in December. I ended up getting to quite a lot of series that I was putting off for the whole year that I wanted to read in December. And then the second book that I finished was my first audiobook that month, but also I had started this audiobook in the like 3rd week of November, and that is Listen for the Lie by Amy Tentera. I really need to get some water. Hold on. We are almost done. Okay, so where did I leave off? I listened to Listen for the Lie, and I gave it a 5 stars. I absolutely loved that book. I wanted to try, like I said, some different thriller authors besides Frida McFadden, because like I said, I'm cold. The Housemaid's Wedding ended up being my last Frida McFadden book of 2024, because again, I wanted to get into some other thriller writers, and I loved this book, gave it a 5 stars, but would leave it in the past, obviously. And then I read one of my favorite thrillers that I read the whole year, and that was called That's Not My Name by Megan Lowley. This was absolutely fantastic. All I said in my review was, for a debut novel, this was fantastic, and I really love it. And actually, her second book that she's ever written is coming out tomorrow, and I'm picking it up at Barnes & Noble tomorrow, and it's called No Place Left to Hide. I actually forgot to mention that in my January TBR video, that I was going to read it literally this week. So I'm picking that up tomorrow. But I absolutely loved this, but again, leave it in the past because it's a thriller. I wouldn't reread it. Then next up, I binged the trilogy of The Daughter of the Pirate King by Trisha Levenseller. I probably wouldn't reread this, but I loved it at the time, but would just leave it in the past. But that doesn't mean I don't think about it. I think it was a great series. It is YA though, so again, I would probably just leave it in the past, but I do want to get into Trisha Levenseller's other series. I still have The Shadows Between Us and The Darkness Within Us that I really need to read. So I don't remember if I mentioned that in the series I need to read. Maybe I did. I'm not sure. Then I finished my second audiobook of the month, and that was Lights Out, which is the first book in the Into Darkness series by Nevessa Allen. And this book was everywhere. Everyone was talking about it. So I'm like, I kind of wanted to dabble a little bit into dark romance, and this was just such a fun time, but I wouldn't reread it. Neither here nor there, just leave it in the past. But I'm very excited for the second book to be coming out later this year. And I feel like with a first book for getting into dark romance, I think that this is a great recommendation, because this is from someone that doesn't really like reading too much dark stuff. But when it comes to dark romance, it's really not too dark. You know, it's not like absolutely devastating. Like I said, it's like a dark romantic comedy, because some of it is so fucking funny. So I'm like, I could get into dark romance if it has elements of humor. Then I can do that. Okay, next up is my final Catherine Center book that I read in 2024, which was How to Walk Away. I really loved this book, but I wouldn't need to reread it. I would just leave it in the past. Hold on one second. Okay, we're almost done. Then I decided to binge another trilogy, and that was the Belladonna trilogy by Adeline Grace. I really loved this series, but I probably wouldn't reread it. So again, just leave it in the past. But I do think that this was a great upper YA series, and I think I said the same thing about How to Walk Away. I would just leave it in the past. I wouldn't feel the need to reread it, but it was still a really good book. Then next up is Lovelight Farms by B.K. Borison, and that is the first book in the Lovelight Farms series. Again, would leave it in the past. It was just a Christmas read. I actually ended up returning it, but I still really enjoyed it when I read it. I'm just going to rapid fire between these because my voice is getting tired and I just want to wrap up this video. Okay, next up, honestly, I think this, I would say Burn. I really did not like this book, and that is The Christmas Tree Farm by Laurie Gilmore, and it's the third book in the Dream Harbor series. I don't know if I'm going to continue this series, to be honest. They're, like, good for the time. They're almost like I've said about this when I reviewed it, is that it's kind of just like a bad movie that you can't look away from. And, like, again, the first book was my favorite. And then the second book was boring to me, but the third book was just so beyond cringe, and some of the romance scenes and some of the smut scenes were just like, the dialogue was absolutely horrible. Then I'm like, I think I would burn it. Wouldn't even care about a rewrite. Sorry, but it was like one of my least favorite books, and I kind of feel like that about another Christmas read that I'll talk about in a minute. Oh my god, did I forget to talk about The Kiss Curse too? No, that didn't come up yet. I didn't even read that yet. Hold the phone. Next up, I read my favorite book in December, and that is Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling. I cannot wait for the second book to come out in July. I love this book so much. I recommend this book to everyone who loved Quicksilver, because the found family, the banter between the characters, and the banter between the side characters is very reminiscent of Quicksilver, but it's not as much of an epic scale as Quicksilver is. Like, Quicksilver is like, but it's so good. But like with Fear the Flames, I just loved it. It was just the perfect book at the perfect time. Absolutely loved it. Would 100% reread it. I love it so much. And then next up is The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year by Allie Carter. And this also was getting a lot of hype. I did read a lot of Christmas books in December, obviously, and they're all in my Christmas reading vlog if you didn't see that yet. And this was one of my favorite Christmas reads that I read. It was just so much fun. Such a fun, cozy mystery read. But I would leave it in the past because, again, it was a Christmas read. I'm not going to reread these Christmas books. And then I read a really short novella. Well, I always say it was short, but it wasn't. But it reads very short. But it's 230 pages. But it only takes you like 5 hours to read this. And it's called My December Darling by Lauren Asher. Again, Christmas book, would leave it in the past, but I really enjoyed it. And then I read a super short story because I wanted to read something really short on my Kindle to at least get one more Kindle read into the month. Because I only ended up reading 4 Kindle books in December because I really wanted to concentrate on a lot of my physical TBR in December. So I just read the super short Cruel Winter with You short story from the collection of Christmas short stories by Amazon, and it's the Under the Mistletoe collection, and this one was by Ali Hazelwood, and honestly, really did like this book a lot, but again, we'll leave it in the past because it's a short story, but everybody was saying it was the best one out of all of them because all the other ones were pretty bad, and I really liked it. So, like I said, Ali Hazelwood is an author that I'm going to continue to read her books. I might end up reading her backlist first before Catherine Center because I own 3 of her other books that I haven't read yet and I really want to. Okay, next up was Spectacular from the Caraval series, and this is the Christmas novella. Again, would leave it in the past, but I had such a fun time reading it. It was so much fun. Okay, then this book, honestly, I regret reading this book because it really was bad. It was just bad. Oh, I didn't talk. Wait, hold on. I read this book before Spectacular, sorry. So then I read the second book in the X-Hex series, which was The Kiss Curse. Again, would just leave this in the past, but I also would think I would rewrite some of this. But I thought it was a fun, quick little read. But I felt like I had to read it before The Wedding Witch. But honestly, if I didn't wait to read this book, then I probably could have read You with a View in place of The Kiss Curse. But it's fine. I wanted to read it before I read the third book. And it was okay, but I would just rewrite like some of the romance scenes because I think I've said before that this author tends to forget about the romance and kind of makes it all insta-lovey, but then like the plot is good. They were okay. And then the last one that I read in that series, like I said, I read this after Spectacular, was The Wedding Witch, and honestly, I would burn this book. I think this book was so unnecessary to this trilogy. I honestly feel like this book was so poorly written. So I would say rewrite, but the plot was like all over the place in this book. For a book that's like only 275 pages, I thought it would just be like a short, quick, fun little read. And it's just like, I did not enjoy my time with it. It just wasn't very good. I love the cover though, but honestly, burn. I just really didn't like it. And then the last 2 books were Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom that I read in 2024. Absolutely adore this series. Would 100% reread it. They're amazing, fantastic books. And I'm so excited to get back into the Grisha-verse with King of Scars and Rule of Wolves because they're both on my TBR for this month. And I can't wait to read them. So yeah, that is it. That is a wrap up. My 2024 reading wrap up is done. Yeah. Woo, woo. I sound like Larry. I love her so much. Yeah. So, those are all the books that I read in 2024. I cannot believe I read 188 books. For someone that didn't even read one book until October of 2023. And then I'm like, what the fuck am I missing out on? A world of magical books? Like what? But I just wanted to say to you guys, does not matter how many books you read. If you read 1 book a year, if you read 1 book a month, if you read like 12 books in a year, so you read 1 book a month, that is incredible, honestly, because you're reading. And that's all that matters. Reading is not a competition. It does not matter how many books you read. It's the fact that you're reading and you're enjoying what you're reading and you're picking up what you want to read. And don't let anybody pressure you or push you to read something that you don't think you're going to like. Read what you want to read, pick up what you want to read, pick up what you're in the mood for to read, and that's all that matters. So, congratulations to you. If you met your reading goal, if you even read a book this year, congratulations, okay? Because that's amazing. All right, so I love you guys, and please like and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram at CW819 and check out my Poshmark at the same handle. My goal for 2025 on Goodreads is 100 books. I just left it at 100 books this year because last year I made it 50 and then I kept on exceeding it because I kept on surpassing them. But like at the beginning of the year last year, I set it to 50. But I feel like this year I could read 100 books. So I just set it to 100 originally. Maybe I'll set it to like 120. But I want to see if I hit 100. Once I hit 100 books, then I will probably exceed it to like 150. But we'll see. So yeah, I love you guys. Bye.